Alrighty, y'all. Welcome back. Hope you are enjoying your day. We are unfortunately looking at something that's probably going to be a little frustrating for me. How Americans are tricked into buying fake food. That seems like a pretty crazy headline, right? Well, I hope they explain it, and I hope it's not as bad as it sounds, but you never know. Remember, I am a proud American, and there's lots of things to love here, but there's also, these days, so many things to be frustrated with here. And especially when it comes to food. Food is something everyone needs, and food is related big time, to diet and your health. And I just want to eat clean and eat good food and know that I'm spending my money on something that is as advertised, and that if I'm buying something healthy, I want it to be healthy, right? We all want to live long, fulfilled lives. Being lied to by something when it comes to food, that's just wrong. Let's see what this is about. This is from CNBC. It'll be linked down below. Check this whole video out and check them out. Here we go.
This is olive oil, right? Wrong. Well, maybe some of it is, but this is actually a classic example of food fraud.
Extra virgin olive oils are being switched out with cheap ones.
And fraudulent to
Oh
sell
my
something
God.
labeled as something else.
Why is this fish being mislabeled? Your Parmesan cheese products do not contain any
What?
Parmesan cheese.
Is there was no one brand that stood out as completely safe.
Wow, so we can't eat anything.
Geez,
I
even
guarantee
spices?
you, anytime a product can be passed off as something more expensive, it will be. It's that simple.
Counterfeits, dilution, substitution, and mislabeling.
My
Food fraud
God.
not only harms consumers' wallets, it puts their health and safety at risk.
Yeah.
We might not know the overall impact of food fraud because so much of what fraudsters do is hidden from us and has been for
Why?
centuries.
Some estimates say
Like, that's what's crazy. Like, why? I know this is going to revolve around money. It always does, right? Look, we all have heard this, even in other countries. I know you guys have heard this at some point. It's like the U.S. has so much money, right? Like, oh, it's the richest country in the world. That's what they claim here. When does it end with the money, right? The nickel and diming. We already have the most money in the world, quote unquote. Like, geez, do you have, like, where is the goal here? Big companies at the top are so obsessed with money that everyone suffers. That I just don't understand. What is
food
the
fraud
point?
affects at least 1% of the global
So many billion-dollar companies are billion-dollar companies. Isn't that enough? What, like, you need to get more money at the expense of people's, like, safety?
food industry, at a cost as high as $40 billion a year, according to the Food and Drug Administration.
My God.
Grocery manufacturers of America estimated that 10% of the commercially available food
my
in the United
goodness.
States is adulterated. That's 1 in 10. It means if you're not on that 8-item or less checkout line, you've got something in your cart when you leave the supermarket. That's probably
That almost seems too low. I'm surprised it's that low, and that is too high. It should be 0. Your food should be food. It shouldn't be messed with and also be misadvertised. It should be 0%. But I'm surprised it's only 10, to be honest.
checkout line, you've got
Jeez.
something in your cart when you leave the supermarket. That's probably bogus.
Here's how and why fake food sits secretly in our kitchen cabinets.
That's frustrating.
According to the FDA, food fraud is considered economically motivated adulteration, or EMA.
It's a
Beautiful.
monetary impact to
Beautiful.
the consumer and to the food manufacturers, but it's also a potential public safety, public health impact. It robs
Yeah.
us of nutrients
Yep.
and can kill people and has done.
Larry Olmsted researched food fraud for years and published his book, Real Food, Fake Food, in 2016.
As I worked on this book, my definition of fake food became anytime what you buy is not what you think you're buying. Doesn't really matter whether it's legal or illegal. It's where you're being tricked. You're buying
Yeah.
something that's not what you think it is.
The worst offenders can include seafood, meat,
Ugh.
dairy, honey, alcohol, spices.
Well, that's a lot. I thought we were going to name a couple things. No, that's like, that doesn't leave a whole lot that's not corrupt. Wow. Seafood, luckily, I stay away from. Dairy, I stay away from. So I guess there's that. I don't eat a lot of meat. I do eat chicken a fair amount. And I'll have other meats very rarely here and there. So I guess, in my mind, hopefully I avoid some of this BS. But the fact that, like, they're saying, I hope they talk about more about, like, olive oils being not correct or not as advertised. Spices, that's kind of concerning. Of course, any produce, that's very concerning as well.
Fraud happens more with more expensive foods. Totally makes sense, right? There's a higher margin.
Right.
Take your extra virgin olive oil as an example. Fraud usually occurs here when a cheaper oil is added to the more expensive oil.
See, you're just trying to do something right. We try and buy the cleanest, proper, healthy oils. So if you're buying extra virgin olive oil, you're already, supposedly doing the right thing, or at least a better thing than buying something really unhealthy like canola oil or something, let's say. So you're just trying to buy decent stuff, and you're still getting screwed?
Label still reads 100% extra virgin olive oil.
100%, okay.
Fraud.
Olive oil has been
So it's mixed in with cheap BS, but it's marked as 100%. You're being lied to. That makes no sense to me. How I thought the FDA was supposed to protect people here. How does that slip through the cracks? It's one thing getting, fraud or getting screwed when you're buying something cheap. Like, oh, I bought a toy and it wasn't like it was showing on a commercial or something. Physical, just material things that you don't really need. Yeah, you expect here and there something isn't going to be as good as it seems, or built, not really to great quality or whatever. It is what it is. But one thing you should never be lied to or false advertised is food, because that's not a material thing. Food is a necessity. You should know what you're buying, and you should, especially when you're forking over big money, because we all know groceries are through the roof. I have never spent so much money in my life as I have in the past year on food. It's unreal. When you're spending your hard-earned money on food, you should know exactly what you're getting, and you should not be lied to. That is just horrible.
Adulterated for thousands of years.
I don't know how this
passes. Because it is of high value and it is sought out.
In any country.
They might flavor it with beta carotene and maybe color it with a little chlorophyll to make it a little more green. And so then you've got a lower quality, cheaper oil.
So both of these olive oils I got at the grocery store, and both of them are the store brand, but one cost way more than the other. This one had a label of 100% Mediterranean blend of extra virgin olive oil. So the olives were sourced from a bunch of different European countries, and it said it was packed in Italy, and there was no expiration date. And when I purchased this one was a 100% California extra virgin olive oil. First pressed, cold pressed, unfiltered, no artificial colors, preservatives, or flavors. And this one had an expiration date. It said that these olives were harvested in October, November 2022, and that it would be good on your shelf until August 2024. And it was much more expensive.
Much more, right.
Roughly twice as much as this olive oil. And
so obviously that one's better because it gives you more peace of mind. It tells where it came from, when it was harvested, when the expiration should be.
This one had way more information about where this olive oil came from.
But you're gonna have to pay twice as much to have something that should be on anything, regardless of the price.
Now let's look at the spice market as another one that's vulnerable to fraud. Think of an expensive spice, like saffron. This tiny amount cost me $20
Oh
at the
yeah,
store.
that stuff's really expensive.
Saffron can be bulked up with some other material like plant stems and sold as the same, according to the FDA.
Popular spices like basil and chili powder from a range of different brands.
Anything that's kind of colored orange, brown, and ground up can be passed off as turmeric.
Oh
It's the
my
ultimate
God.
bait and switch.
And then there's fish.
Why does the FDA allow this? They're supposed to protect consumers.
FDA says seafood fraud can occur when a less expensive species of fish is substituted for a more expensive species. After all, it's kind of hard to know what fish you're buying, right?
If you're an experienced chef or fishmonger, you can look at like a red
much
snapper
at
fillet
all.
and tell whether it's red snapper, but 99% of consumers can't.
Right.
Most of the fish we eat is white fish. Every fillet looks pretty much the same, which is why there's so much substitution. The FDA is mandated by law to inspect 2% of the imported seafood, which is, I think, a very, very low bar.
In fact, the U.S. imports as much as 85% of its fish.
Yeah,
Federal fisheries
I've heard
enforcement
that.
is serious business. Agents from NOAA and U.S. Customs tear open a container filled with frozen fish from Thailand. They're looking for fraud.
First, it's important to understand the matrix that food fraud lives in. There's intentional and unintentional types of food risk. Unintentional risks include food safety and quality, like accidental foodborne illnesses.
CDC estimates about 50 million people a year contract a foodborne illness. Only 20%, 1 in 5 of those can be identified. So there's 40 million people a year getting sick from something they ate that we don't know what it is. And a good guess would be that fraud has something to do with that.
I have to say, food poisoning is, I feel like, kind of a gray area on what you could even define as food poisoning. Maybe I've gotten it multiple times in my life, and we're talking on like a spectrum. Like maybe I've had very mild cases or just symptoms of it at multiple times throughout my life or whatever. But I can tell you what, in 2019, I think it was, early 2019, I legit got full on, was definitely food poisoning, and it was from store-bought turkey, which I'm someone who gets scarred by stuff, so I haven't bought that since. It's been, 4 years? It was, unfortunately, I always prefer deli meats that are freshly cut right in front of your face, like real meat cut, fresh, and packed, and it's yours. Well, unfortunately, very rarely, I bought prepackaged meat, and that's what it was. It was prepackaged turkey. I don't even remember what brand. Oh boy. I had that, like, the next day or whatever, I opened it up, made some sort of just like homemade sandwich. I have never been more sick to my stomach, like an hour after I consumed that. And then literally, I'm not kidding, for I think it was I would say about 3 weeks. No, definitely 4 weeks. I was so sick to my stomach 24/7. I felt fine. I wasn't sick in that way. But whenever I would eat, it would bother my stomach. I had, digestive issues big time. It totally messed me up. And I lost a ton of weight quick because I couldn't hold anything down, or it would pass right through me. It was terrible. So food poisoning is not good. It is not fun at all. It was one of the worst experiences of my life.
Then there's intentional. That's where food fraud is alongside food defense. The difference is fraud is motivated by economic gain, and defense is motivated by harm.
If you have a ton of coffee and you can turn that into 1.2 tons by adding some cheap filler to it, you've just increased your profits by 20%.
Oh my God.
And a lot of these products pass through a lot of hands. They go from small growers to big trucks to tankers to boats to processing plants.
Wow.
It's not necessarily like this big company that's selling you coffee that's ripping you off. It can happen in a lot of ways along the way.
Yeah,
Even
that's
the FDA
true.
says it can't estimate how often this fraud happens or its economic impact.
Probably a lot.
Over the last 10 years, the most common fraud committed is lying about an animal's origin and dilution or substitution, both ranking at 16% of incidents recorded. Dilution and substitution are exactly what they sound like. Perhaps somewhere along the supply chain, the real expensive process of refining something like fresh olives is ignored. Maybe a little canola oil is added instead.
Oh.
Then there's the
See, just when I said you were trying to avoid that stuff because canola oil is proven to be really bad. You're trying to avoid it. You're buying something more expensive and healthier. You're buying olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, and you're still getting freaking canola oil. You're getting lied to and you're getting
removal value
poisoned.
when an ingredient or part of a food is intentionally left out, taken out, or substituted altogether.
That's
and that
so frustrating.
substitute can be a non-food substance. That's the 14% of the recorded food fraud incidents using non-food substances.
That sounds healthy.
The pandemic has given us a chance to focus on supply chains and forced us to.
For example, during the pandemic, labeling fraud really spiked in 2021 to 21% of the types of fraud that were committed and recorded.
If we knew all about it, why hasn't it been solved? The key was we weren't focusing on prevention. Food fraud prevention, if we do it right, is boring. We're the fire marshal checking exits and smoke alarms, not catching the bad guys.
The U.S. has laws in place to ensure food safety. That's part of what the FDA does today.
Basically, all food fraud, all product fraud is illegal under one law or another, somehow.
Before the FDA existed, manufacturers could add basically whatever they wanted into the food.
Oh,
Think of Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. That book was published in 1906. Like the Food Safety Modernization Act signed into law in 2011.
And then horse meat hit.
The fraud was on a grand scale.
Horse meat was blended into beef in the UK, across Europe.
And sold to unsuspecting supermarkets for a period of 8 months in 2012. The scandal was exposed.
And that was a great wake-up call.
Some companies purposely mislead on labels.
Prosecuting the fraudsters committing the crime can be tricky. After all, they're purposely trying to avoid that detection. But criminals are caught. like in 2016.
Product labeled Market Pantry 100% Parmesan contained cheaper Swiss and cheddar cheese and an organic filler called cellulose, which can be derived from wood pulp.
Castle Cheese was caught adding wood pulp and cheddar to its grated Parmesan that they sold as 100% Parmesan cheese.
The FDA does allow fillers like cellulose in cheese, but it can only make up 4% of the total ingredients.
Of course they allow stuff in there still. That's the funny part.
The president of the company got a $5,000 fine, 200 hours of community service, and 3 years of probation.
For its part, the Food and Drug Administration says its job is to make sure food doesn't hurt you, not to police the labels.
Fraud is tough for the consumer in terms of food because it's difficult. They don't have a lab in their kitchen.
Yeah.
The food fraud.
That's what I'm saying. I'm a consumer and I'm a guy with a family and I just want to be a good human being and I want to live a good life and I want to eat healthy. I really do. Is that too much to ask? What am I supposed to do to make sure that I am feeding my family and I'm feeding myself with food that is as advertised? Hearing this stuff all the time makes you question, like, what am I even supposed to eat? What do I even trust? How do I go shopping and hand over tons of money to the store and know that I'm even getting something that's good for me or something that's poisoning me? It's really frustrating. It really is.
Fraud prevention think tank has a 5-question survey consumers can use when shopping for food. 1, what type of product is it?
Be aware of product that you put on you, in you, or plug in the wall.
2, quality. Can you recognize the difference between the products? If you can't easily tell the difference, that makes you more vulnerable to fraud.
If I drink scotch, I couldn't tell you if it's a difference between a $50 bottle and a $5,000 bottle. So I know I could be deceived at that point.
3, supplier. Do you know the retailer or the supplier? And do you trust them?
So when you turn that box of cereal or bottle of juice over and read the back, there's a lot of information that's required by law that's helpful to the consumer.
And then question 4, are you buying this item?
Well, you know, my wife and I have become way more aware of, we read the labels of everything we touch in the store before it goes in our cart. I never used to do that, you know, when I was a teenager and young adult even. Now I got into a little bit in my 20s I used to be big into fitness, so I like to read stuff and for that kind of deal. But now I read everything thoroughly because I want to know, of course, your normal things like calories and protein and carbs and all that stuff. But you also want to know, I do it more now for ingredients and seeing what's in there and certain things you want to avoid, right? So we're very aware of that, but that's half the battle. But the other half is, even if we are good about it and we read our labels and we are more strict with what we buy, well, is the label that we're reading even accurate, or are we just being lied to? You know, like, that's the part that, how do you even control that? Like, it's weird.
Online,
it's just weird to me.
The supply chain can be shrouded in more mystery when shopping online. So how did you find out about this website? Is it reputable?
Yeah.
But it depends on how you find that supplier.
And finally, 5, complain.
I don't buy groceries
online. It's not
online.
a question, but the food fraud prevention think tank says if the retailer is legit, they will want to know.
I think manufacturers can be the victims as well.
The FDA also relies on consumers' reports.
In recent decades, fraudsters have gotten more sophisticated in the techniques they use to fake the food products. And that means that our detection methods and our test methods and standards have to be better at detecting fraud.
Yeah.
That's why the U.S. Pharmacopoeia Convention provides a framework for organizations to detect its vulnerabilities.
We have food fraud mitigation guidance, so it is a supply chain risk management tool to really take a look at which ones are the more risky products suspected to be adulterated.
Sometimes it feels like this is not that big of a deal, but the more fraudsters are able to achieve, the more...
Yeah, the more they'll get away with, the more they'll keep doing, and it'll become, you're not even eating food anymore.
Or we end up paying in the end as consumers.
These cases rarely result in criminal penalties. If you want to be like a drug dealer and import heroin and you get arrested on a large scale, you're going to go to jail. But if you can make $80 million importing adulterated honey and then you're going to get a slap on the wrist and some fines, why wouldn't you do food instead of drugs if there's no basically criminal downside to it? So as long as we don't take it seriously, why should the perpetrators take it seriously?
What we want is the food industry just to be focused on making food. And not have to worry about looking over our shoulder, checking different suppliers. And that's going to impact more food being produced, better food, safer food, less expensive food. There's plenty of things for us to worry about in the world today. And food fraud should not be one of those.
That's right. And people will have to be just way more aware. and study nutrition to the best of their ability. And, you got to try and find out what is not acceptable on the ingredients list and stuff like that. And you got to know what to look for. And then when things are somehow come out that they're not as advertised, or something doesn't feel right about a product or is mislabeled, and you know it, people have to speak up, and the company's got to hear about it, and retailer or whoever. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts to this. That's the crazy part. But yeah, it's got to be taken seriously. So on other levels, it can also be taken seriously. And, positive change to real food with not this BS false advertising and BS fillers and all this crap. Like, no, we want real food. It's already costing us way too much. The least you could do is spend a lot at the grocery store and at least have real food that's, somewhat healthy if you picked a healthy cart, right? That's the goal here. Everyone wants to have a positive outlook on food. I mean, geez, don't mess with our food. This one was really interesting, right? Interesting, we'll use the word there. Because look, I'm an open-minded guy. I'm also a positive person. And like I said, I don't try and complain or be overly negative or anything, never. But when stuff like this, especially when it comes to food and, companies deceiving consumers and food not being as advertised, like I said, it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this down below, okay? Please throw a like on there if you did enjoy this and found it informative at least. Subscribe to be part of this amazing community we do have here, and check that description, of course, for this original video. Give them a look. And yeah, with that being said, I guess I really got to be careful still what we're buying at the store, right? Good luck, I guess. My name is Ian. You're watching IWrocker. Until next time, catch you later.